Into the new year with the economic recovery underway, it appears that consumers don't share that optimism. MasterCard's latest worldwide index of consumer confidence shows that South African consumers are less confident than they were at the beginning and the middle of last year. Confidence now sits at 59.8 points from 67.3 in July, 79.35 a year ago. This is the index's lowest reading since it was introduced in 2004. Joining with more on the survey is Anthony West. He's MasterCard's General Manager for Africa. Anthony, thanks for coming in today. Interest rates have been slashed by 500 basis points over the course of last year. We have the rand sitting quite firm at the moment, the economic recovery underway. Why is this not being felt by the consumer?
Stephen, first of all, I think we must make the point that the survey was done in November of last year. And I think that people are still suffering from the shock of the previous year. And it is very much more of a indicator in direction going forward. I think we are seeing a change in the sentiment, particularly towards the end of the year and as we start the year. I must also say that it is still in a positive territory because the index is measured from 0 to 100, 0 being the most negative and 100 being the most positive. So anything above 50 is still in the positive territory. So it is substantially down on where the consumers were feeling around the January and the mid-year time frame of last year, but it's still in positive territory, and we firmly believe that over the next 6 months, as the economy starts to stimulate and move forward, that it will move back into very much sort of in the higher dimensions of the ratings.
Anthony, who's included in this survey? Is it MasterCard customers?
No, it's not. It's typically bank customers, or they are bank customers between the ages of 18 and sort of mid-60s, and it's a broad base of customers.
Now, of course, we saw retail sales figures for November, that yes, the same month when the survey was taken, a shrinkage of 6.6%. So that really ties in with the consumer picture towards the end of last year, where consumers weren't spending and obviously feeling a little bit cash-strapped.
Yeah, our own sort of figures, if you will, at the end of Q3 were very similar to what the retail numbers were, particularly on the credit card side. However, I will say that debit has a substantial growth, and we've seen that during, it's quite common that in any sort of challenging economic time, consumers are inclined to move away from credit spend to spending their own money. So there's been phenomenal growth on the debit side, sort of in the 30 and in the sort of late 20s, early 30 regions.
And so that must be encouraging for a company like MasterCard, because you have very much been pushing the debit card side of the business, haven't you?
Yeah, Stephen, very much so. I think today we're very much a payments company. We were born out of the early years of a credit card company, and we're very much in the transaction, the payment space today, which would include debit card, credit card, through prepaid, through remittance, through the mobile operation, so the entire remit of payments. So absolutely very encouraging sign for us.
Of course, we lost over 1 million jobs last year during the height of the recession. Do you think that's the main reason why consumers' confidence has fallen so heavily last year?
Stephen, I think we must say it is one of the key factors. I think it's it's a general dampening effect, and clearly there was interest rate challenges and people had to tighten their belts. But I think the employment and fall in employment is actually a huge impact in terms of sentiment.
Of course, we were sheltered somewhat by the 2010 Soccer World Cup. Government spending obviously is boosting our confidence levels as we head towards that date. Has this cushioned us compared to other countries? Are we seeing weak confidence in other countries as well?
Yeah, it's very much so across the, I think across various sectors. This time, for the first time, we've actually included within the African sector 4 other countries. So it's Nigeria, Morocco, Kenya, and South Africa. Nigeria is particularly bullish, and their consumer confidence is sort of in the 90s. Morocco, we're finding, is very much sort of thereabouts from a positive point of view. Kenya's sentiment is negative; it's below 50 from this point of view. But of course, they went through the genocide challenges about 18 months ago. So I think there's still a fall through from that. But if I look at broader Asia Pacific, there's a general positive sentiment, particularly towards the Far East. So we're definitely bucking the trend in terms of our current sentiment. But we definitely see that changing as the year progresses, and with 2010 coming on at us.
Of course, China really stands out, confidence improving strongly from 60.8 to 85.3. And of course, we have seen growth rates of about 10% coming out of China at this point, haven't we? Yeah,
Stephen, absolutely. And I think it's well spoken about by leading economists that China actually never went into the recession. So it's quite understandable they would still be in the position where they are.
Kenya, pessimistic 47.9. You did mention the election problems we had. Of course, last year a drought, the stock market shrank. Our stock markets, on the other hand, grew quite strongly. Yeah. Did that come through in the survey?
Stephen, it's reflective. I think of our indicators that we clearly measure, stock market is one of the key 5, and that is the only one that's really shown a positive trend, which is in line very much with where the JSE is in terms of its own growth. So it tracks that index very positively.
course, you also make distinctions between the cities in South Africa, and Joburg has ousted Durban as South Africa's most confident city, and we don't have the sea at our doorstep there. So what's so positive in Johannesburg?
I suppose it would be often spoken to the fact that Johannesburg is the New York, if you will, of South Africa. It's a very diverse economy, and it is a very populous environment. So general business sentiment is always positive, and there's a great development opportunity. I think the challenge, though, more is if you look towards Durban and Cape Town. Cape Town is second to Johannesburg, and then Durban has fallen quite substantially. And that's really, from our perspective, I think, a function of the recession. Both those cities are very heavily driven by tourism. And if you look at inbound flights into both Durban and Cape Town, there's been a substantial fall. So I think it's been more from a tourist point of view, with people inclined to stay home and be a bit more cautious. And that's really impacted those cities. But great to see that Johannesburg has actually got to its rightful place as ahead of the list from just an economic perspective.
Anthony, you said you would expect consumer confidence to improve this year. What are some of the key indicators you'd be looking for to boost that confidence?
I think increase in terms of as we see interest rates clearly have fallen to a level. I think people are getting used to that now. I think we'll also find to see that people have gone through this last year, and there's definitely a positive sense moving forward. And it's a matter of people getting out there and spending, and it in itself will grow in a positive way. So I think it's about the consumer themselves getting out there and putting the recession behind themselves, and then moving forward.